talk with Kenny because this needs to be over.
The term expired.
She's never here.
Did it say recording? Okay, I didn't hear it. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. First item is roll call.
Chair Ward,
Here.
Vice Chair Flynn,
Here.
Commissioner Breen.
Here.
Commissioner Dixon, absent. Commissioner Chung, absent.
Good.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item, next item is item 2, oral communications. This is where persons wishing to address the ASCC on items not on the agenda can do so. Is anyone here in the audience? Online? Okay. Go ahead.
I a really hard time. Anything, it's me or
Hey, Dave,
Hey, as
We're-
far as
we're here. You want to talk? Hello?
Dave?
Mr. Cardinal, if you want to speak, you're live.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Okay,
You're out.
somebody else? Okay, let's move on to the agenda. So the agenda, starts with nominate an alternative, alternate for the ad hoc site evaluation committee, since Rebecca is moving on to higher and better things.
Will you volunteer?
I did, but,
No, but-
you still have to vote.
But Dana, are you staying on?
Oh.
Oh, you're also leaving. So there's not going to be an alternate. This is an actual,
Yeah.
the person.
Okay.
And he's all there is.
Okay.
I nominate Carter to be to the ad hoc site evaluation committee.
Okay.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain. I'm just.
Motion passes 2-1.
Next item is to formalize having the ACC conduct a real preliminary review as part of all major projects. Rebecca, you want to talk about this?
Right. So what we've seen in many of the projects that have come before us is that they're pretty much 100% baked in, 99% baked in. And so then the ASCC has, very little purview to make any kind of major changes to these projects because the homeowners and the applicants have all spent a fortune getting their plans together, getting attached to their plans, and they're just not willing to make any kind of changes, if you will. So we're left with changing a few bushes and a few lights, which sort of undermines the actual role of the ASCC. So my, proposal, or all of our kind of proposal, was to kind of back this thing up, allow applicants to come before the ASCC in more of a preliminary, with more of a preliminary application that doesn't involve enormous amounts of engineering and all these other things, so that we can start the process earlier to the benefit of both the town and the applicant.
I totally support that. I've been talking about this for a while. One of the things, Terrence, that, we'll need to do is reconfigure or, create a reduced list, of submittal, items, for a preliminary review. Things like, complete landscape plans, complete civil engineering would not be required. Completed geotechnical investigation would not be required. It really is to give the ASCC the opportunity to understand the essence of the design, its site relationship, and to be a tool for what I would hope for on the major projects, is a field meeting to understand the design, as part of that preliminary review. Because that's the other part of it that I've been hoping to reinstitute.
I love your word gestational,
Mhm,
that we need to see projects in the beginning.
mhm.
I mean, I remember times that we've been in a site meeting, where I said, your house is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
You're gonna move the house,
Mhm,
put it over there, and that was the right call.
mhm.
So, yes, I think we need to see, we need to be in early.
Okay.
So my question is, though, you've also proposed an idea of having a subcommittee meet even before this, right?
Well,
To evaluate the committee. So I'm just trying to understand kind of how the process might work.
I'm not exactly sure. That's the reason that I brought up, kind of several ideas, to talk about tonight. I brought up the subcommittee in an effort, to try to help alleviate, the SB 330, problem,
Mhm.
of having it count as a meeting. And so, because the projects that are going to be probably most problematic, are those that are going to want to utilize, the 5-minute meeting rule. So to me, Terrence, part of this was to, have a discussion, with you and with us, kind of, to arrange, you know, our way of thinking, because the bulk of my experience on the ASCC, has been, to repeat my own word, gestational, has been, to see designs, several times, during the, the review and approval process, to, essentially to help, design professionals and to help, applicants, mature their designs. The state sees that process as, as being problematic and cumbersome. And it's my hope, and I think it's, our hope with the ASCC, is to make it so that it's not, so that it actually helps, applicants move forward more quickly, rather than, taking as much calendar time or as many meetings. So I'd be looking for your advice, as to how to do what I think we're trying to do, is to, have the ASCC have an earlier opportunity, to help neighbors, and applicants move forward more quickly.
There are a couple, it's a great idea. And there are a couple ways to go about it. One possibility is to create a preliminary application process with a fairly low fee. And you make it voluntary. So if you want to stick to your 5-minute meeting rule, okay, but you might have to move the house to the other side of the property. In my experience, usually property owners will avail themselves of an inexpensive, quick look at a project so they don't end up going down the road a long way. And this could actually alleviate some staff issues too, particularly if staff really didn't get involved in it. A preliminary application listed what they needed, and then it was submitted to the ACC for review without it being chewed on by staff, without taking up particularly the consultant planner time. So that's why I'd have to check with Catherine about whether or not I think that if it's voluntary, it wouldn't count as one of the fifth. You could even make the application say that you, by agreeing to this wouldn't count as one of the required meetings, and make them sign that in blood or something. So I think that's one possibility.
Yeah, I like that.
I also think, and how we could insert this idea, but all the times that applicants have come to us afterwards and said, we have had such a better project because of our working with the AFCC.
Mhm.
And also think of like what we built in this town.
Mhm.
I mean, all these decades and decades. I mean, everyone wants to be here because of the work we've done. So, I mean, it's a huge draw
So,
and people
so,
need to be reminded of that.
so how can we do this, without costing a bunch of your time, and, staff time? Should, should one of us, write what we think, that reduced list should be?
Gina's actually sent me something that I can forward to you all now that we're in a public meeting
Okay.
of what her ideas were.
Mhm.
But it was to complete the ASCC permit application form, complete the ASCC application checklist, a separate detailed narrative on the proposed project, a topographic survey. She asked for a copy of the arborist report, which, we can debate that. I don't think it's that personally important. Indication of whether the project is within an HOA. And then set of plans, sections, elevations combined as one PDF. Site plan, this can be a sketch or multiple sketches showing setbacks and easements, building locations, proposed finished floor levels, approximate landscape and retaining wall areas and locations, proposed parking, fire access if it's required, and then any large trees to be removed. And then she puts floor plans, roof plans, building elevations, and minimum one building section showing relationship of grade to the house, if there's a basement, et cetera. So that was kind of her list.
Yeah, I would propose probably a short, a lesser list than that.
Okay.
Because I do think that, we're trying to, we're trying to get the design approval mill started earlier
Less
we-
baked in, yeah.
so that there's less investment.
Mhm.
On path, site earlier in
Yeah.
path.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Why don't we assign Gina and I, the subcommittee, to write this list?
Yeah.
And Terrence, if you could work through, with Catherine, how we can make it voluntary. To, so that we can avoid, it counting as an official meeting. Because the other part of, part of what I would want, is at least some rudimentary marking on site, of, kind of the building footprint, and some level of story pole development,
Mm.
so that the field meeting, is most effective.
Okay.
And I think, what I'm gonna suggest, is, kind of a qualitative, kind of list, because it's voluntary,
Mhm.
so that the applicant, can, show how they feel they're qualifying, rather than an objective, objective list. Because I think some projects, that would qualify for ASCC review, are really low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
Others, would be much more significant. So
Story poles are helpful though.
that I do think that story poles and, having some indication of
Bulk. Bulk.
where it is,
Right.
the bulk and,
And for neighbors.
Yeah.
I understand that too. I mean, I also feel very strongly about doing this earlier because of neighbors.
yeah, well, because I do want to, activate the neighbors. But put them in a position, so that they can become coach, rather than adversary.
Mm.
So, if you don't mind,
No, I do.
um,
Please.
I mean, it would require the creation of a new application. And so that's going to be a town council, direction. So at some point, you're going to want to do a colleagues memo
Mhm.
that asks the town's council to, I would just call it a preliminary application. I had this experience when I was in Newark, where we had a preliminary application process, and essentially property owners could put what, as much detail as they wanted. I always told them, the more you give us, the more you're gonna get. That's valuable, but sometimes it's just, would you support, would you, this would be the planning commission application, but would you consider rezoning this industrial property to residential at all? And so it was $150 fee, and they could get a chance to get in front of the planning commission and say, and they didn't give it much detail at all. And of course, and sometimes people would give the complete detail. So you might even allow that with that same kind of concept where somebody could just come to the ASCC and want a concept. What do you think about doing
A
something?
two-story building.
X.
Yeah.
And it's hard work for the ASCC. I'll be frank. And
Yeah.
you're one of the things that you've got to deal with is you can't impose conditions that you're not legally allowed to, right? You couldn't have them come in and say, well, we don't like 3 units, even though you're entitled to 3 units, be better with 2. So you'd have to be careful not to do things that were not legal. So that's the hard work of the ASCC to sort of stay on the right side of that. But I think it's quite doable if it's a voluntary preliminary application.
Right.
So I think let me do a little research with the town attorney to make sure we're not stepping in it. But then the next thing would be for you to ask the town council to create this process. You could include a
Colleagues memo.
yeah, as part of a collective, you can include what you think would be a good application and whether or not you like my idea of allowing them to give you as much, as little or as much, with the understanding, the more they give you, the more they're going to get concrete ability to move forward. So that may be your first step if you want to do this, because it would require an ordinance change to add this additional application. I would recommend that it not be, I think I've already said it, but it not go to planning staff, except to be packaged, to be brought in front of you. There isn't a lot of cost unless we are sending it out for someone to review. Is the floor area proper? Is the coverage area proper? If we're doing that, then it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be
Yeah,
a burden for us.
I do believe that, the applicant is going to need to represent,
Mhm.
that they understand, what the floor area limits are, and they understand what the impervious surface, and they have preliminary calculations.
Yep.
And in several jurisdictions, I've got experience, with this preliminary process. And the onus, is totally on the applicant.
Yeah.
Because, even with the action, of the design review board, afterwards, there's, still a requirement, to fully comply. And that, the action, is preliminary in nature. It's not a final review.
So I have a question is what, in terms of these preliminary calculations, what is the process currently that an applicant comes, brand new owner, they want to do a remodel, they go into the town to ask the questions, correct? They make a Zoom, like an online thing. How do they go about getting the specifications for their property?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways, but the typical way is the property owner's already hired an architect or some sort of land planner, but usually it's an architect, and the architect already knows the rules of the town. Either that or you need a new architect. But then they do occasionally. They also do go to the free first meeting that
Mhm.
they get to get input. But of course, we can only, in that case, the planner can only give them what the rules are, not not the input of the ASCC that could improve the project, because the ASCC is kind of the keeper of the wisdom of what makes Portola Valley special. So, so that's how it typically happens. Typically, but we occasionally get someone who's trying to put something together early. So they come in and they want to know, they want a zoning verification. Just what is my zoning? What can I build here? And they also want us to do a calculation on the impervious surface and floor area ratio. So sometimes they kind of they come in just without an architect in little pieces, but when there are architects involved, it goes fairly smoothly because they know what's necessary to.
And a new architect that not familiar, do they usually come into the town to get those details? Okay. And is there a fee associated with getting those details?
First call is to, it's free. There's an interview, but that pretty much tells them what to submit.
Mm.
And then the fee becomes fairly expensive.
I have a side question. For decades, since the 1990s, the town has been doing, the floor area calculations because of the complexity of, of the algorithm. And I've heard lately that report is not being provided with the residential data report, as it's required under the ordinance. Is that going to come back?
Yes. Okay. And yes, we are, Emily's going to be working on those in-house, but those calculations will be done over the counter essentially.
Great.
Right now, you're sent to get in queue for a Good Cities appointment, and it's quite frustrating I'm sure you're aware. So.
And what's the fee what will the fee be, or is there?
Oh, it's the same fee, but
I think it's been $100 and $110,
Oh.
something like that.
It's part of the residential data report.
Oh, okay.
Unless it's something strange happens, it's fairly straightforward. It's
And-
fairly straightforward looking at the GIS system and doing the math.
And once the calculation is done, it's recorded with the parcel file. So, it's kind of a one-time deal.
So I think that's how you'd approach it, is to make sure you get town concurrence, that they want to create this new approach.
Okay.
Of course, I can't speak for the present interim town manager or the next interim town manager or the actual official town manager that you're going to have, because they're going to want to weigh in on this. But I think you could structure it, in my opinion. I think you could and I haven't spoken about this with any of those three entities. Two of them are unknown. But I think you can structure it in a way where there's minimal staff costs, but it does put a little more burden on ASCC, and the architects put together the information. If the architect doesn't understand our calculations, and as Chair War was indicating, they need to know that. They could end up ACC saying, yeah, that looks fine, assuming it's correct. But if it's not correct, they're back at the drawing board.
Good. So I think we've got, good feedback, and a process, for, item 3B. Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to actually establish the subcommittee?
I suggest we do. There may be other things that,
Oh, to combine into that subcommittee, because the thing with the idea of an ASCC subcommittee even before the preliminary application.
so let's go on to item C.
Okay.
And this is my request, Terrence, so that, I'm hoping, to actually see, the projects coming in, and really start to be prepared so that the chair, and the planning director, understand, the projects or the conversations that have been happening, to see the kind of waiting in list, and if there's anything, that we as the ASCC should do in preparation.
Mhm.
And I'm only envisioning it, as a 15 or 20-minute kind of thing. And I didn't know if that needed to be a formal request, for expenditures, or if that's something, that fits within the regular operation, of the building and planning.
Yeah, I would need to talk to the town manager, but that's all.
to me, it's a telephone conversation, and maybe a couple of emails.
And you would have the bandwidth to be able to.
There's only so much of me, so, yeah, it does mean, it does mean some of my time is allocated in that direction, so that's why I need to check the town.
Well, the thing that I don't have, any transparency or understanding of how you and Emily, are keeping track of, of what's coming in or what's been distributed. Because, that to me is also, part of, the ASCC, should be part of the ASCC's review, is to see, where things are at. And that's, it's not to try to, gerrymander, or,
No, no, I
or interrupt the management process. It's really trying to make sure, that, that the ASCC is being as effective as we can be.
No, I understand that. I just, it does take some staff time, so I need to check with the town.
That's fine. Let's move on to D. I really, for the last several years, the ACC has been kind of shuttled around, and particularly as things are trying to get cleaned up, before, before and after the election, there was a whole bunch of, special meetings. I'm disappointed that, that Kenny isn't here on a regular meeting night. But, part of what we're doing as volunteers in the ACC is setting aside, two Mondays a month, to be here. And I believe that, that there are things for us to attend. And I'm hoping that the preliminary process, gets us more involved again. Because it's disappointing when, everything is, is so baked in, as, as you mentioned, Rebecca.
It's too late to say, if you wanted a flat lot, you should have bought a flat lot.
Maybe even a
Or
different
you want to
town.
say that in the beginning.
Might have been in it.
Yeah,
I would have considered a different jurisdiction.
My favorite line that he did for 20 years. You wanted a flat lot, you should have bought one.
No, and that's understood. You'd like to meet at your regular time as much as possible, and, however, the flexibility of meeting special projects when we're trying to move projects forward is appreciated.
Yeah.
But I understand the goal is to meet at your regular meetings and to have more items at the meeting, even if you don't have anything to approve, more of an update or something that gives you a chance to, review something and also hear from the community.
And I think you're going to need to calendarize the projects, the housing element projects.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're gonna, you kind of need to look at the whole month, the whole year and say, we're going to get to this one. We're going to get to this one at this, so that you can sort of parcel out the subcommittees that are needed to work on these projects, because we don't have the money to pay for outside consultants. They're going to have to be the people that kind of bless the project and put it into the right language. But I think the legwork is going to have to be done at this level.
Yeah.
So the more of that we can get onto the calendar over the course of the year. And those are the sort of things that can move a bit versus a project from an applicant needs to be, that might have to push something out. But, as long as it's on a calendar, we know that, or you will know that.
That's to me, part of figuring out, with the planning director, how the year is going to come together. Also will, help forecast, for the town council, the efforts associated with that. Okay. E, establish a standing ASCC subcommittee to meet with applicants early in the process. Is that something we want to do informally or formally? Historically, it's been informal. And, it was something that, the planning director would say, hey, why don't, the planning director would meet with somebody, say, hey, why don't we sit down with a couple of SEC members, and talk about, what you're thinking about? Because, usually it was when Tom Vlasic was uncomfortable with something coming, and he was looking for a little bit of horsepower, to help convince somebody to do something better, or move the driveway or not take down all the trees or something like that. So, I'm fine, with an informal process. The issue then, is establishing an ethos, where, you and Emily, and your staff, say, hey, this is something we can do. And it doesn't need to be a big deal, but, one or two of us could, come down to the town or meet on the site. Because as long as we're complying with the Brown Act.
I would totally volunteer to be that person.
And Gina's also expressed interest, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of interest.
Yeah, I just think,
Down and help.
I think it's probably the most important thing we can do, to help people, get their arms around stuff. So let's talk, let's make sure that we, we will probably be part of, the colleagues memo. To say that this preliminary process can also, have parallel or associated with, a volunteer, telephone call, or an email that says, hey, I got somebody, you have time to come and look at what they're doing. That makes sense, Terrence?
It does. They do seem a little bit duplicative, but I can see how they could fit together. But in your colleague's memo, you'd probably want to make it clear how the preliminary application process and this sort of more informal process would fit together.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but, I think that, depending on what somebody's, thinking about, you could see one or the other, or both, being appropriate.
And one would be public and one would not, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I like the idea of kind of going through the design standards and actually being on site, like what you put in here, just to discuss siting strategies and potential design neighbor issues. I mean, I think that's really valuable to an applicant. But would there be a charge associated with that?
No. Be volunteer ASCC members. And I don't see it involving staff at all,
So at what point,
except for, coordinating the telephone call.
so at what point would that kind of occur? Because a lot of this stuff is even before they've done much at all.
Yeah.
So how would they even know that this was an option? I mean, maybe they took advantage of the freebie calling in to kind of find out what the details are of what's allowed. And then I guess staff could communicate, well, we have this program where you can meet with one or two ASGC members at your site or kind of go over what the Portola Valley aesthetic is, the design guidelines. Maybe that, I'm just trying to think, how are you going to route it into this process?
I think it could, I think it should probably stay as informal as it can.
Mhm.
I think we can outline it in the colleagues memo.
I think this is a good move.
Okay.
I have a quick question. So should there be a written document, like we had an informal meeting on this date, these folks attended?
Documentation of the meeting.
Would there be something that the person walks away with or no?
Seems like there should be, to be honest.
Well, then we need to charge for it and someone needs to. I mean, it's one thing to volunteer and
Yeah.
talk and wave your arms.
I have
Yeah,
another question. Should we also maybe do a cursory look at other jurisdictions to see how they approach it and then come back next meeting with what we like, what we don't like? Or is that a little too broad?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think any jurisdiction is doing it. And I think it's been, you know, historically one of the real differences in Portola Valley. You know, when we did preliminary meetings and had, you know, essentially only required, you know, scribbles and sketches, you know, to get the ASCC, you know, process started, it almost naturally happened, you know, because, you know, applicants didn't have a lot invested. You know, they hadn't hired, you know, multiple consultants. You know, they really were just starting to think about it.
Trying to get a temperature.
Yeah, and then, you know, they come in and it was kind of sit across the table. I mean, before the schoolhouse, you know, was remodeled, it was, you know, over in the classroom. You know, and literally, we just sat across the table and, you know, talked about it and, you know, and sometimes would, you know, have a field meeting, you know, and just said, hey, you know, it doesn't make sense to push it all the way over here in the corner with this 5-foot retaining wall. Well, why don't we think about moving it a little further away so that you could, you know, protect that tree and not end up having to have a retaining wall at all. Save yourself some money and, you know, and create a better relationship. And, you know, it was, there aren't other jurisdictions that do this as far as I know.
Certainly not with the burden that the putting on. We're done, staff still manages that property.
Yeah, and if the staff is doing it, I for sure want, you know, some kind of, you know, written response. You know, the thing that Dan and I have, you know, experienced by doing this is that it feels more like neighbors and neighbors, you know, just having a conversation about it. And that's what
It works.
That's what I'm hoping it to be. Because I think it could alleviate a lot of, you know, adversarial stuff. You know, because the majority of the adversarial, you know, stuff has been, you know, in my observation over the last few years is, you know, been, well, the applicants say, well, you know, staff said it was fine. You know, and it was, and it got to us and we went, wait a minute. You know, and I think it's gonna help you all a lot, you know, to have to, you know, to create more comfort, you know, that the design is actually, actually meeting the bigger ethos, you know, question.
We have done things very differently in this town.
Yeah.
You know, we just have a completely different look.
Design appropriate scheduling for projects and commission meetings. This is one,
Can I, just so I understand, this is really just, when it comes to the subcommittee or this informal drawing on your experience, that's really just a request to staff to incorporate that in our process. It's not really a new ordinance. or
it's
anything
not,
like
it's
that.
not a new ordinance. It's not a requirement. It's essentially providing an opportunity, you know, for, you know, the staff, as you see a recommendation, you know, makes sense. You know, you know, it's to put applicants in contact with us. You know, we're our contact information, who we are is public.
Yep.
You know, and I think what we're saying is that we'd like people to call us.
Got it. And this is actually is also true of D. It's really just a suggestion to staff that we try to stick to our regular meeting.
Yeah, it's, these are not requirements.
Yeah, no, before we went on, I wanted to know that, and actually, if it's okay, I'd like to take a minute to introduce Javad, who is our interim town engineer. And he wanted to come and meet me briefly but he doesn't have the whole evening, so I wanted to take a break and just say hello.
Come to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi.
Button.
Press the button.
There you go. Good afternoon.
Javad.
Hi.
name is Javad, and I've been here for almost 2 weeks.
Oh, wow, welcome.
I am the interim engineer and excited about this, especially since I am working in that office, which is a platinum, highest rating US Green building certified. And I am a certified lead, which is leadership in engineering and energy design. So I really appreciate that. And I've been working with a lot of people in the town. Professional, very close, and excited to be part of this community.
Cool.
Right.
Nice to meet you. We'll look forward to spending more time together.
Looking forward. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll let you go home. Okay.
And Gerard, you can stay as long as you want. I just didn't want you, if in case you needed to cut out, that I didn't want you to not have a chance to be introduced. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's already 9:20.
Thank you for your indulgence.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah.
This, F is really about getting enough time to actually review the staff reports. Some staff reports, are going to be really simple. The 700 and 900 page staff reports are really problematic. The bigger problem that I have when I'm reading them is that they used to come tabinated, so that, that you could go to a section that you were looking for. And right now, they're all just serial. So with the wedge project, there were places where there would be a reference, to an exhibit, a reference to an attachment. And I had the devil, of a time trying to find the attachments. So, the request for me, let's talk about it, is to try to make them, particularly the really big ones, a little more user-friendly to locate stuff, rather than just piling stuff in. So go ahead, Emily.
Just to confirm, in the body of the text of the staff report, if there's a reference to an exhibit or to an attachment, you'd like that linked within.
Well,
To an
Well, I-
embedded
I-
HTML link. that would be
well,
good.
I like an HTML link,
To a
but,
page.
but I also, when Sharon Hanlon, was doing the, the agendas, there would be essentially an index, so that I could click, if I was if I was interested in the third project, then I could click on that. And then inside of that, there was also an index, to the attachments. So, because for me, I always look at the drawings
Mhm.
before I read the staff report. Because I want to, establish my own set of opinions around the design before I look at the staff report or the
The narrative.
The narrative.
Everything. Well,
and oftentimes the lighting cut sheets, are long before the place that I want to look at lighting cut sheets. Because they get gobbled in, even before the drawings a lot of times. So the other one, is just giving, I mean, if the staff report, comes out Friday at 5 PM, and the ASCC's meeting is Monday at 6, it doesn't really give us the kind of time, that we hope for. So, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you know, there was a suggestion for 10 days before, but to me, that's probably more than we need to, because I'm not going to use all of those 10 days either. So,
So Gina had a comment about this. She's like, please, can we make this happen? Getting the packets on Friday evening before a meeting is really difficult for me. I usually have a really full work schedule on Mondays, and I'm with my family on weekends. I can make more time and be more thorough with reviews if I have more notice and time to look at things. You know, I enjoy being part of the ACC, blah, blah, blah. So I'm the same way. I mean, Monday night, I mean, I kind of compared a little bit to the planning commission. They have big packets as well. They get theirs Friday night, but they have until the following Wednesday. So they've got, 5 days, whereas ASCC has no work days, essentially. We have Monday, essentially. So I also had talked to Helen about this sort of peripherally because I spoke with the Good City people. And I forgot to actually ask them this question, which is why she was responding. She wrote, larger jurisdictions have staff submit their reports 6 to 8 weeks before they go public. But smaller jurisdictions don't have the staff capacity to work on the packets in that depth. So we submit our reports in Half Moon Bay 2 weeks before they go public. In those 2 weeks, there are multiple reviews and revisions, but sometimes if staff is out, we have a week to get it turned around. So, if perhaps she works at Half Moon Bay, so she says it's based on staff capacity and on the team's ability to process the town's ongoing requests and concurrently plan and prepare for public meetings. So, I would like to get a better understanding of the process because the applications are coming in from the applicant. You're evaluating them and then assigning a Good City consultant planner to work on it. And then they're coming back with, I don't know exactly the process. They come back finally with a report and then it comes into your office to do more. I don't know. That's what I don't understand, what the process is. So.
Applicant goes straight to Good Cities. And we meet frequently, at least twice a week, to go over projects that have been submitted. The Good Cities puts together the draft staff report. I review it. Emily reviews it. And we make changes and that becomes the staff report. And then it's brought forward. So the timing that you're looking for is not a problem. It's particularly as if there's adjusting to it, it means projects are going to be slowed down. The only caution, it's not a caution. The only thing I would note is that applicants are always looking to get it done as quickly as possible. I haven't heard one yet that is like, next month is okay. So there is that staff is going to get pressure if they know there's a meeting coming up, they're going to aim at that meeting. So if we have a procedure, again, this is a case where it's just a matter of staff developing a procedure. If we have a procedure that for example, it has to be 1 week ahead of the meeting, 7 days ahead of the meeting. And then if the staff report's not together in time, then it goes to the next meeting. And it's not a burden for staff. And oftentimes these delays are because materials aren't being sent in when they're supposed to be. So I'm personally very much at peace with simply having a hard line. This is the deadline. If everything's not together, it simply rolls to the next meeting. But we will get pushback, and you will get pushback from people who are complaining about the delay.
But it sounds like the delay would be at their end, not at
It
the
doesn't-
staff
It
end.
doesn't stop them from complaining, but
Of course. I mean, I would actually say, let's put a line at the Friday, the week before. And then if there's something that comes up that Friday that shows there's something missing, then okay, you get this, you kind of communicate to the thing that we're doing you a huge favor. We'll allow you to get it in by Monday. So that there's a wiggle factor, but just
I-
communicating the hard line is the Friday before. And that way you also have a little bit of a wiggle room to allow you to have it in on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, from an applicant's position, if the Friday, if not the Friday before, but the Friday.
The week before.
The Friday, the week before, you know, were the soft deadline and the hard deadline for staff reports would be Tuesday. You know, that would give us, you know, 3 business days, you know, before Monday, you know, of the meeting, you know, to get ready.
Well-
I'm not going to be on it, so you're,
I'm just talking out loud.
Yeah, no, I would recommend not having a soft deadline and just having a hard deadline and actually, it's gonna be a jarring experience for some people. So we would just need to inform the ASCC that we're gonna be holding this hard line and people will complain, at least at first, as they adjust to it. But, you know,
Well, it comes at no cost and it comes at a great benefit.
yeah, no, I understand.
To the staff and the ASCC to.
No, absolutely.
To reduce the amount of panic, you know, and give us the opportunity to actually read it, because I guarantee you that I didn't read all 621 pages.
the vegetation management plan. That about killed me. I skipped through a lot of that 100-page document.
Well, after 20 years, you learn what to skip.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't read everything, and I spend the weekend preparing for the meeting, but I don't find it onerous, and
Well,
I
I'm-
don't feel like we need to do this, but
Well,
it's up to the rest of you.
Well, I'm like Gina, my weekend is not dedicated,
Yeah.
you know, to town stuff, you know, so I end up, you know, spending, you know, Monday, but I do have work I still have to do.
And I also think having those extra work days allows questions, because I often have questions that I think it behooves me to just ask directly to planning as opposed to doing it in the meeting and prolonging the meeting. It just seems like,
I would like the hard deadline to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Fridays, we get pretty skeleton crew. So, I
May-
personally think a full week, the Monday before should, I mean, maybe we give that a try and see if that provides you adequate time.
Well, if we can do that without any cost, it doesn't.
Well, except for the pain from the complaining, but yeah.
but if they know the deadline, what is there to, what, you know,
Well,
what,
'cause it's a new deadline. They
a
don't
new
know it.
deadline for whom?
Well, we
For-
can institute it with the change in the year.
There you go.
To know
Perfect.
it's new.
Yeah, right. Who needs to know? The deadline.
I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that, I'm not arguing against it. I'm just telling you what
That's fine.
it's full disclosure of how the initial, people have been going through this long process. Our process is quite long. And they've been zeroing in on a particular date, hoping that they're going to get there. They're repeatedly asking us, can we make it there? So on and so forth. And now we've got to go and say, well, we actually need an extra week now to get that done. And that's okay. They'll deal with it. And it's only going to be a few projects that it's going to
But-
be,
Most of their material would have been submitted a month before, right?
yes, or 2 months before.
Or 6
2 months before, yeah, so.
Yes, no,
I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
Okay, we already talked about G.
So, well, I guess I had a quick question about G a little bit more extended. Besides adding in links, you know, embedding HTML links into the PDFs. My question is, why do we really have to have every document into one PDF? Because that kind of, we're just sitting there. I can remember how many times we're kind of waiting for a 1,000-page document to come up on screen just to look at one page. So to me, like the vegetation management plan could have been a separate document. You know, some of these others could have been separate documents. So
I would totally support that. And I think from a, you know, presentation standpoint, it would really help.
No, I understand.
Solve the bandwidth issues.
I'm simply not aware of the technical side of it, so we'll have to look into that.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen documents like that, so I know it's possible, but I don't know what impact that would have on staff.
Okay, probably make it easier.
and
Just-
also be aware that a PDF, you can go into the outline of PDF. So
Yeah.
that does somewhat help you a little bit without the embeds, but it would be much easier to have embedded links.
It needs to be as push here dummy as it can be. H.
Oh, I wanted to add one thing about the 7-day, the, projects that are public hearings would of course still have a 10-day noticing.
Yeah, the notice would still have gone
Yeah,
out.
no, I just want to be,
It's just the staff report.
that would be ahead. The noticing would be ahead of that.
So say that again, public hearings
Yeah.
as opposed to what? Just a regular ASCC meeting?
Correct. So now the requirement for an ASCC item is 72 hours. So we're going to have a goal, at least, except in emergencies, which we'll keep in our back pocket. Of a full week ahead of the meeting, but if it's a public hearing, it'll be noticed 10 days before the meeting, not 10 days before the week. Okay, thank you.
Tracking modality of upcoming projects. That's, that to me is connected with item C and,
Mhm.
and the regular schedule stuff. You know,
So Terrence, what exactly are you doing currently for tracking? Because I'm thinking also in terms of this Permit Streamlining Act, where you have, 30 days to respond or, got all these, does that apply to these projects or is that something different?
Like the housing element projects?
Well, I don't know. There's something that was called Permit Streamlining Act that's coming into force on January 2025, I think. Maybe SB 35, and I don't know the number exactly, but,
I haven't reviewed it yet.
oh, okay. But you are already doing some type of tracking,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Is that in a
It's a-
spreadsheet? Is that?
It's a fairly antiquated spreadsheet, so, but we need to get on that. So that's something that Adrian was doing,
Hmm.
and of course she's been busy otherwise. We'll get more involved in that, and having it be something the ASCC and the public can see is a good idea.
Right. Perfect.
Okay, develop and prioritize future projects for 2025, which is related to housing.
Mhm.
So we've got a pretty robust set of programs, that we're probably behind the 8 ball, on some of this stuff already. And one of the things that in preparation for this, that I felt, could help the ASCC be more productive, is actually really doing a design guidelines update. To include the multifamily, and mixed use, building types. Because currently the design guidelines, really only deals with, single family homes. It doesn't deal with ADUs hardly at all. And I do think that, I think it's served us very well, but it's nearly 30 years old, and, I believe some additional sketches, talking about massing, building volumes, could lead us in a direction that helps us adjust the objective criteria that we have to have
Mhm.
for the housing projects. That was what Rebecca and I, kind of came down to is,
New design guidelines,
well, no,
updated.
Refreshing. Yeah.
it's really refresh, to add the building types, that we're now having to deal with. The housing, the design guidelines never dealt with commercial space, or office space, in any specific way. So I think if we made that, a high priority for, the beginning of this coming, calendar year, we could give us a leg up on lot of these, you know, housing element programs. Because then, because part of what I'm hoping for coming out of that, you know, is to give the public more comfort, you know, in what those building types, you know, are going to mean, what the massing is going to impose, and what the likely mitigations, you know, in building arrangement, building spacing, and landscaping, you know, can do. Because,
Privacy.
well, there's a whole set of things, but
Use.
You,
views, trees, I mean, it's really the difference, you know, and I think that then if we then, you know, look back, because the thing we were having trouble with, you know, with the objective criteria, you know, particularly, you know, in the multifamily housing, you know, was that we didn't know what so many feet of this kind of wall and so many feet of this kind of wall and so many feet of you know, covered porch or, you know,
mhm.
entry yard and what those things meant. And to me, it's going to need to be kind of tested out. And to me, that's another, you know, kind of subcommittee thing that
I would be interested in participating in this group,
yeah. Well, I think that,
and I think you should too.
yeah, well, I think, you know, I mean, Gina's a talented architect, you know, I think it's a kind of a series of things that, you know, need to test out what these rules mean, and use our natural skepticism to say, well, if we did this to the nth degree, you know, what did it mean? You know, and so you could see how big or how bad it might be, you know, and to see, you know, what would need to be tempered, you know, in form or response. Because I think that, I mean, essentially that's how the design standards, you know, the design guidelines, you know, actually happened in the first place. You know, was trying to test out ideas.
And people do read them and look at them.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to be doing a project, I think a lot of people look at the design guidelines.
Mhm.
Well,
It's a good document when
Well,
we
and
get it.
particularly with the requirements now that they be objective, that they be very clear and that you know when you've met them and when you're not. So in that regard, that people certainly do use them. They absolutely do. Now, I'm inferring from your discussion that, because I know you guys are aware of our budget situation, that you're talking about really a volunteer effort. The ASCC itself would be diving into this, and staff's involvement would be sort of late in terms of just processing and seeing that that the design guidelines are adopted. Is that a correct assumption?
I think so. You know, I think the process is to, you know, do some testing, you know, with the volunteers that are here. You know, trying to say, you know, find the good parts and the bad parts, you know, out of the rules, you know, that as they're currently constituted, you know, and then agree on what, you know, and then as a full committee, you know, actually look at them and see, you know, does this really represent what we're, you know, trying to do? And then, I think it'll be a natural step to be able to identify the things in the ordinance, you know, that, you know, might need adjustment, you know, either up or down or even eliminating. You know, because I mean, I think there are probably things in the objective ordinance that we might not even want, you know, because I think they're much more, you know, urban or suburban, you know, in what the
Mhm.
response is. And that's, you know, when we were doing that, that was what I was afraid we were doing, is setting ourselves up by rules, you know, to create an urban environment, versus a rural environment where the architecture is subordinate to the landscape. And that's, to me, that's where we need, from a design guideline standpoint, we need to figure out how can we do, 20 units an acre, and with the density bonus, because I think we have to recognize that the density bonus is going to apply to every housing project. It's not a maybe. It's a,
Is it going to apply to town-owned land?
I'm sorry,
To
what?
town-owned land?
density bonus.
No, if it's town-owned land, you get to set, the town gets to decide.
So it's an applicant-driven process. It's the landowner's driven process to use density bonus. So so at least for, well, God forbid, Ford Park, I know, would not have density bonus.
One element that I would point out is you're going to want to at some point involve the planning commission and the town council in this. So you might want a separate colleague memo that went to the planning commission, just letting them know that you're intending to do this, that you, that the ASCC is going to be embarking on this effort, and that they can look towards a review at some point in the future. I mean,
Well, it already exists to a certain extent, right? Because Carter, I think you and I and John Golden
Yeah.
were on a subcommittee to work on the MF and the well, you weren't on the mixed use, but
Yeah.
the MF objective requirements, which is put on hold while we're waiting for HCD to get around to coming back with approving our housing element. But I guess my question about this is, it seemed like HCD was pretty strict about you can't go back and make any zoning that you've created more strict.
correct.
So any kind of changes would be more clarification or reducing, getting rid of some of the really fussy.
Well, I think that's where I
Requirements.
think, there was some very fussy kind of urban kinds of things that I think are necessary in an urban environment, to make, buildings more approachable. In a rural environment, it's more about the larger massing, and the spacing between the buildings
Mhm.
and the arrangement of those things. And if you could end up, lining everything up, and the space between the buildings, could feel like it's gone.
Mhm.
Where, you could simplify the rules, but require the spacing to be larger. I don't know for me.
So I guess one thing for you to think about that I'd suggest is whether or not it's a subcommittee where there's a planning commission, there's two planning commissioners, two ACC members, like what has been done in the past, or whether you want to sort of do this as percolating up where ACC develops a draft, presents it to the commission like that. So I don't know which way is better, but I think it'd be good for you to think about how you want to approach that.
It would be great to work with some of the kind of thing I think,
It may be too detailed
maybe not. I don't know.
for them.
There is and this is my perception, I haven't been here that long. There is a difference that the planning commission has towards the sort of detail, the design level. So it could work well as a sort of, you develop a draft and present it and maybe even bring policy questions that you've got to them. But it's your call how you best do that. It seems like Portola Valley usually does the subcommittee route. But if you're going to be doing the hard labor of actually drawing up those design guidelines, it might be easier to be ASCC all the way and then involve others. But
Based on my experience and knowing the bodies, I think the ASCC should, from a design guideline, develop the ideas, vet the ideas against the rules, and then advise the planning commission and the town council on what these pictures, that I'm imagining, another set of pictures,
Mhm.
that, creates an ethos, around, how you get there. In other communities, they'll do these very specific plans around different neighborhoods or regions of the town, to establish, the sense or the feeling. And I think in some ways, this is what, what we're going to be doing,
Mhm.
is saying, this is what we're hoping.
This is the general style
This-
gradations
This
of,
is the kind of thing, and what the design guidelines did before that I thought was very good was that it didn't establish style. It really talked about, architectural response, massing response, landscaping response, building shapes, site planning. So,
You want to start this in the early part of the year, 25. I think we should.
First-
Second shift you and me. And Gina.
Dana,
well, the 8th, right now, the interviews are tentatively scheduled for the 8th, right?
Of January? Good.
well, it's,
So I guess my other question related to that is in terms of budget. So at some point, absent you or Gina actually doing the drawings, we would need to have the SCC would need to have a little bit of budget, but we would have to have some staff time allocated to the project after you've kind of worked out the details, and then a little bit of a budget probably from a consultant to do the drawings and do the final language or not. I don't know. That's,
I think the language is, the paradigm in the language, I think is pretty well set. It's just a matter of wordsmithing. And I don't know for sure. But, I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
I
Yeah.
bet we could get a donation for that very easily.
The-
for the
This,
design guidance.
this is not, this is gonna have to be a volunteer effort. There isn't any budget at all, for this kind of activity. So, the town council wanted to have a balanced budget and we had to cut to the bone, and beyond. So,
and nobody talked about that $18,000 town volunteer party that needs to go. That would go 18,000 right there. That could be used for a consultant.
We could have had a party and it could have been potlucky and everyone BYOB and we still could have had a hell of a party.
Of course, we can still do that, but it's still sitting in the budget, $18,000. Sorry.
Well, I'd have cut it.
so not to go off unagendized matters, but in all seriousness, the ASCC members have a lot of experience and talents in this area. So I think if you want it to happen, you're gonna have to count on it being almost entirely your work.
I totally support
It'll
that.
be a better document. It'll be a good document.
And you hand it to staff and say, publish it.
Kind of, yeah.
Go down to pink ones.
Needless to say, well, if you have questions, we're happy to advise you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll fall together pretty quickly. And I don't see it as a giant issue.
Well, I guess the simplest thing, I mean, to start it all off, to take the design guidelines as opposed to the multifamily guidelines is to actually have a digital document that's not PDF.
Mhm.
If you're going to be wordsmithing it, you might as well, actually, I don't even know if that exists, a Word version of that design guidelines.
PDF we can convert.
Yeah. So if you have, since you have software, so yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah, where was,
Bud and
oh shit, I was on there.
Mike, you were.
Yeah,
Leah,
yeah, that's existing.
George Comstock. Holy cow.
Bud's passed away, Mike Schilling.
Everybody goes.
Steve Harrison moved away.
Sure, excuse me. But your intention would be to replace the existing design guidelines or to
No.
add a layer.
I think it's to add a layer, that really is, because I don't want it to stand alone as separate. I really, want to add, the building types that we've added to the ordinance. you know, which include, uh, affiliated housing, mixed use, development, and multifamily housing. And the multifamily housing, you know, has got, you know, it's three to six, you know, and it's 20 to 23. Those essentially taking the rules, you know, as they currently exist, even though they haven't been published. And saying, what do they mean?
Right.
Because I do think that, you know, you could have all kinds of interpretations. And part of what the design guidelines, from my standpoint, you know, having helped author, you know, the current set, was to give guidance, you know, to design professionals and applicants on, you know, kind of what the Portola Valley Way is. You know, rather than just letting them go by themselves.
Right. So
I mean,
perhaps we call it a revision or an updating of the,
Update. Could be a design guidelines update.
and, for helping me sell it to HCD, we'll call it simplification too, or something like that.
Uh,
Anyway, we'll talk about that
Objective
later.
requirements.
No, yeah, well, we're gonna get to objective requirements.
Sounds like a form-based code in waterway.
Well, it's,
In design.
well, that's, I mean, that's what we, I mean, that's what has been, that's what's been approved by the planning commission, the form-based code. And right now, I mean, well, maybe it's just test, maybe it's not designed that, but the issue for me is I know that our consultants never tested, you know, what those rules meant. You know, and the planning commission and the town council approved it without knowing what it looked like. You know, I know Rebecca and John, you know, and Gina and I looked at them, you know, and Linda looked at them a little bit, you know, but it was mostly numerics. And said, well, geez, you know, it's this big and it's that
Yeah,
much.
we kind of got rid of the most egregious, but there were a lot that still needed to be worked on.
But, and it was simple.
Mhm.
Okay.
One of the lovely things
So-
about it, it's simple.
So it kind of seems like you're merging number 1 and number 5 on my little appendix, my attachment here.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings up the question for Terrence of California law said that whatever laws and guidelines and regulations we had in place before 2020, correct, we could continue to enforce. But once we started making changes to particular things, then that had to be objective requirements. Is that, how does that fit in with this
Well, you-
discussion?
You need to have objective you need objective requirement. These, you can't, and I'm hearing discussion intending to do just that. So, you do, but you absolutely, everything going forward needs to be objective. You can't say things like, you know, at the discretion of the ACC, or you can't say things like, you know, 1.5 to 2 stories based on how we feel that day. We are going to have to be objective, just for it to hold up legally. It's going to have to be, and to keep our housing element certified, which once it gets recertified, knock on wood.
So we should almost organize these programs based on the due dates.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't really try to do that, but,
They're
The problem with I was kind of going through the housing element and trying to pull out things that were most relevant to the ASCC, that's something we could actually work on. And a lot of the programs are, they weren't sort of relevant. I don't know, there were a lot of mumbo jumbo stuff that only the planning people could possibly write or, you know. it was- I mean, so I pulled out the ones that were practical, had a defined kind of thing that we could work on. Some of them are just,
Well, like, the amnesty program, we've talked about that for at least 10 years. Why isn't that something, is that something that I don't even think that's an ASCC issue. Is it?
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, to me, there should be some rules.
Given up on amnesty.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's just a question of life safety issues, but, and then who gets to, what the ramifications are doing it, what the tax question is.
Well, there's an application process, the tax question, and, who pays for it and who gets, this, if the town gets, is the town gonna get, housing unit credit for the amnesty program?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check.
If they pull a permit for something. If they pull a permit because they have to add
No. If they don't-
Kitchen
if
or
they
something.
don't have to, if they don't have to do anything,
Oh.
all they need to do is to say, I have a unit that was built without a permit. Here's how I prove that it's safe.
Well, they would have to pull a permit to have that a unit, right?
There would have to be an amnesty permit.
Right.
But
Then that would count, wouldn't it?
I think we've never gotten a clear answer about whether those units, count towards,
Yeah, I don't know. I'll
towards our rate.
have to ask the town.
Because
And
physically, they,
they're already being occupied in some cases. Yeah, so they don't really necessarily add housing, but if it helps Irina, then. But the question for me is, if we are going to be doing this, from my perspective, we're giving a homeowner a huge benefit for the value of their home. And I think there should be a question of whether they're rented out and rented out affordably. There's got to be some,
There's 7 of them between my house and Willowbrook. They're all illegal and they are all rented out for low market.
right, exactly. So it's not a big deal to ask them in exchange for legalization that they be rented out affordably for a certain number of years or something.
Probably hundreds of those.
Well, I know of one that's not rented out because it's not legal. And the person's waiting to maybe get it legalized to rent it out. So,
but right now, I don't know of a amnesty permit application. This is really above the ASCC pay grade, but if we're trying to help, should we write an amnesty ordinance? Or what would elevate it? Well, right now it needs to be elevated because it's supposed to be instituted in May of 2025. So the town either needs to decide to do it or not.
so for projects, Terrence, on the housing element that have these dates that are next year coming up for the next 6 to 12 months, what's the strategy right now within your office to start moving them forward?
We're still formulating it.
Okay. I mean, only suggestion I have for some of these is to do subcommittees and then have them not necessarily do the work, but at least investigate what needs to be done. So in that case, for the amnesty, maybe the investigation is finding out from Terrence and Company whether or not it would count towards our arena or not, and what's the minimum we have to do to satisfy HCD to show that we're doing progress on these programs. So, I mean, that kind of is the way I would think about it. because it may not be an ASCC, like you said, that particular one may have nothing to do with the ASCC. It may just be a life safety.
There's another big one is the opt-in.
You know, that requires a brand new zone, complete new zoning. We have nothing for that.
The opt-in.
Number 6.
And that one's horribly controversial. So if you just look at 2025, we've got the design guidelines. We've got the amnesty program. We've got the ADU pre-approved. And we've got the 6 units. We've got the affiliated housing standards. I don't think we've established any standards for the affiliated housing. And that's supposed to be already done.
And it's hard to have standards because every one of those affiliates is totally different.
Yeah.
Between the churches and the priory and.
Well,
I don't even know what they're looking for. You're exactly right. I can happily say I had nothing to do with drafting that.
Boilerplate.
I mean, it could be as straightforward as the standards are the same as the design, the objective design standards that you're developing. And maybe
Mhm.
that's the answer for CD.
Yeah, because my understanding is that we're going to, when you write that report early next year about our progress on RENA as well as progress on our housing element, you're going to have to show progress, what in some format. So as much as we can show progress, if it's just verbiage.
Well, the good thing is that our meeting is progress.
Yes, there you go.
You can count on it being discussed.
Right, we started early.
Eliminate contradictory and outdated language.
So in this conversation I had with Good City, they were, part of what we were talking about was just the need for a complete refresh of all our entire municipal code, essentially.
Well, the problem is if we change it, then we have to make it objective.
Right. And then there's also an issue of CEQA that I didn't know about, that making changes to anything in that thing has a CEQA component to it. So, the kind of discussion we had was that if we do it piecemeal, each piece is going to have a CEQA component. We have to evaluate whether CEQA is needed and then go out with the CEQA thing versus, having a major project that does the whole thing. And we don't have the budget because they're saying it's several $100,000 if you have an outside force working on it. So obviously we don't have the budget to do this in short term, but I think it's something we need to start thinking about kind of, for the next year, or whatever.
Yeah, although I would argue that as long as you're implementing the housing element, you can rely on the environmental work that was done for the housing element.
Oh, well, that's good news. Even if you're making changes to the
No, because we're making it compliant.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Because
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at it in particular, but it's quite likely that the housing element was assessed. The impact was assessed, and part of the impact is implementing the program.
yeah, I doubt that there's going to be any CEQA response, except for maybe the opt-in program. But that's the one that I think,
The which program?
the opt-in,
Oh, opt-in.
because I don't even know what it means. We want to move on to minutes.
I think at some point we do public comment
Yeah.
on what we've talked about.
Sure.
There may be people
Is
who
there
want-
anybody want to make a public comment? I see 6 hands here in the room. Could you go first? Oh. they're not there.
Mr. Cardinal, you could speak.
Oh, great, thank you. First of all, I get that you want public input, but we've gone through 14 items in an hour and a half and had none. So navel gazing is fine. I'm okay with it. But there's no way to keep up if you're a member of the public. More importantly, I do think the early review process, which was an hour ago, is a really good idea. And I think that Terrence said, and I've said before, I think it should be voluntary. Otherwise, we're just piling on more and more and more steps for people, even if it's a subcommittee or whatever, it's more and more steps. So I think it should be a voluntary thing, which would be great. And another comment is people are whining that it takes 600 pages to file a report or whatever, a plan, but that's our fault, I think. So if that's not good, which it might not be, then what do we do to make sure that it doesn't take 600 pages or 1,000 in the case of Stanford? Because otherwise, only, billionaires will build here, which I guess would be fine if all you want is billionaires to live here, but I don't. So I think that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Phone number ending 7562, you can speak.
Good evening, Caroline Vertongen. I thought you were going to give priority to the people in the schoolhouse, so please give them the priority because they've been waiting. But since you unmuted me, I would like to speak. I really recommend or commend this committee to find resolutions. However, the problem is bigger than what you think. And so if you remember, and perhaps Mr. Grinnell doesn't know, but we submitted a document to ACD that is flawed, was completely flawed, and has been objected by many professionals, not just residents, people in the geological and people with experience. And even last week, we saw again, and that's what I don't understand, why the town is still seeking consultants that have no clue what we are about. So last week it was Stanford, and we had a consultant from, cities. She was not present. She reported outdated data. And then we had these residents who are passionate with their experience and spoke up. And we're being silenced. This is not how it goes. So I'm on the PPTS, and Mr. Grinnell, I thank you for extending or making it possible to extending the grant that we have. But now the consultant or the traffic engineer that did a ordinance or filed an ordinance on November 13th is gone. He has no clue what is going on in the city. I encourage you that there's so many volunteers. I encourage you and other staff members to work with the committee members, because this is what we have in our handbook. This is how we govern Portola Valley. It's not by staffing, it's not by consultants. Consultants and staff have to work with the committee and the community. So please understand that. And once you understand that, we will make progress. But I really commend this committee for putting steps forward. The Trails Committee did also provide a very good what is it? A move. I could not attend the meeting today, but at least they refer to the municipal codes. We have several municipal codes that protect us, and it's not being enforced. So really, work with the committees, work with the people in this town, and we will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
There are no other hands raised and actually no one in the schoolhouse.
Let's move on to, commission reports and staff reports. I don't, hearing none from you all.
The new mountain lion on Windy Hill with 3 tiny cubs. I hope that they're gonna be all right.
Anything from you? Pat?
Nothing further.
Yeah. Minutes, from the November 4th meeting. Comments on those?
Let's see. Yeah, there were some typos, so I don't know. I highlighted them in a document that I could just send to you. None of them were,
Do they mean anything or change
I
it?
saw a few typos, but.
so
other than that,
Donahue, his name is Donahoe, I think.
Yeah.
That was 3 times. And then in terms of meaning, so when I spoke on page 13, the sentence is in the middle, kind of 12th or sort of thing. She recommended moving the complex 25 to 50 feet to the south and at least 25 feet to the west. I think it's to the west, which would involve more grading and expenses. And that's the opposite of what I said. It's more grading, but could well be less costly.
Okay.
So I will send this over, and then the next page 14. The team has been resistant to agreeing to move the project over. Oh, the team is very apparent to the cost of the project. I think that was supposed to be aware of, stuff like that. And then the third paragraph down, the conditions of approval that were handed out during the current meeting are just an effectuation of the staff report. I don't know that word.
Effectuation? It sounds important.
And then on the next page, page 15, second paragraph, interim planning and building director Grindle South should say sought clarification that the motion was an appended to the recommendation in the staff report approving the conditional use permit. I have no idea what you said, Terrence. Second paragraph on page 15. Sought, but yeah, it's the next system, the next sentence, or the next line that I'm clueless about. The motion was an appended to the recommendation in the staff report approving the conditional use permit. Was an appended? Was appended, maybe. Was appended to the recommendation staff report approving the conditional use permit. Okay, so that's it for me, but I'll email this to you with my markup.
Dana, anything else?
No, I would move to approve with your changes.
I
Because I bet you
second.
caught all the same typos that I.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, passes 3-0. No further business?
Well, I guess just to kind of close up about what all these things we talked about and our list, what exactly are the next steps? You're going to create a subcommittee for Carter and Gina for the initial rewriting of the planning of the preliminary
Yep.
meeting and the preliminary, the informal one? And then what's your plan for kind of moving these things forward?
I think that, Terrence and I, and probably with the chair of the planning commission, need to, look at at least the 2005, and probably the 2025 and the 2026, housing element plans, and look at a rational calendar, for how they're going to be developed, without spending any money. I'm not sure how, HCD is gonna deal with a town that just doesn't have any money to do anything. Because at this point, I'm not sure how they're gonna enforce anything. Because if they're gonna start enforcing stuff, they're gonna have to spend their own money.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not to be tongue in cheek, but it needs to be done. So finding ways to do it with no cost is ideal. But if budget needs to be found, then you're going to have to send a colleague memo to the town council and ask for budget to make these things happen so that we can have continued. Well, hopefully soon we'll be recertified. But we're gonna have to hit these programs in order to stay that way. So,
Because, some of the recertification is doing stuff that I think, there are other committees, working in town, to try to obviate the need for that. And since we're decertified anyway, I think it's an appropriate time to make those, larger holistic changes. In my humble opinion, I think that the town's not in danger of a builder's, remedy. Mainly because of the way that, the property in town is owned.
Want me to try to get a donation for AFCC
No.
so that we have some money to work with?
I think that, if there's something specific, if we as a group identify something specific to work on, I do think that there are donors, that would help us.
20,000,
I
25,000?
don't, I think that, but
That I could get to.
But I was trying to wrap up, the question that, Rebecca brought up, and I do think it's around, taking the housing element list, and putting some goals, on the calendar, and saying, okay, if this is the goal, these are the things that are gonna have to happen in order to get there. Some of these things, Terrence, as you mentioned, could be as little as just saying, that, the affiliated housing is gonna follow, the same rules, as something.
Right, well,
The hard part is that almost all of the affiliated housing is on land that's controlled by conditional use permits. And, in light of, these new, objective rules, I'm not sure how the town is going to continue to, to enforce conditional use permits. When the properties are not zoned for the uses that they have. Because how do you make a rule about housing on affiliated housing when the Priory, for example, is zoned single-family residential?
So does it make sense to rezone it to something more reasonable or in the future or?
I think so, but, the town is has utilized conditional use permits as the
Tool.
controlling mechanism so that the town had ultimate control, over those uses, rather than giving them, giving those uses some set of rules. The argument that's been made, the only one that's been compelling to me for why to leave it alone, is that it becomes a sequel problem.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Well,
it's not on tonight's agenda, but, so we can't really go any further into that, but.
Well, I do want to just make one thing clear, that the design standards for affiliated housing would deal with new projects. The existing projects are grandfathered in.
Yes, but how do you judge the new projects against all of the other things that are going on in that property?
No, I understand that. I just wanted, I didn't want the public to have the perception that there was an issue with the existing project.
No, I don't disagree with that, but.
But if they want to add housing, right, that's a new project.
Yeah,
Right, I was talking about the existing affiliated site.
Yeah, but I'm on the affiliated sites. If they then want to, like the Priory wants to have another multi-family building, right? What standards do they fall under at that point?
Well, exactly. They would fall under the new standards if they were building something new,
Which new standards?
the ones that you're going to be adopting.
Oh, okay.
but. But there aren't any standards for all the other uses that are there. And if we started looking at, the 52 acres of the Prairie or the 112 acres of the Sequoias, and started to, look at FARs, like either the MF, or the MU zoning districts. I just don't know how do we deal with all the other uses?
I don't know.
Because the affiliated housing to date has been judged independent, of objective rules. Because, as a conditional use permit, there aren't any objective rules. So it's about the opinion of the planning commission ultimately, as to whether or not, there's still consistency or, an allowed, rationale for the level of use that's being proposed.
Hmm.
Terrence, do you have, any experience with, the transition of conditional use permit properties, into, properties that are zoned for the use that's actually there?
Not yet.
Well, this, if we want to talk about it, it needs to be agendized. So that's the end of this.
Well, the only thing I think we do need to do is, do we need to have a formal subcommittee of Carter and Gina to work on the preliminary colleagues memo?
Yes.
Do we need to vote on that?
Well, Gina can't vote, so she's railroaded.
Well, she's already expressed interest in it, so,
Nominate Heather and Jean for a
yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to vote on it until you actually drafted the colleague memo and wanted to send it.
Oh, you don't need a vote on a subcommittee?
Well, if you want to create a formal subcommittee, yes, but if you're just asking for two of your members to draft a colleague memo that you'll consider, that's fine.
That's what we'll
Okay.
do.
And then,
I'll coordinate with Gina, to do this
And-
in a form that then I can share with you all.
and then do you want to commit to a timing in terms of when you're going to kind of get together with Terrence and whoever? to talk about the housing element, scheduling, kind of.
Terrence, what do you think, you know, is appropriate? Okay. Time on Tuesday? No. I have no time now. No, I don't either. And I'm. Okay. No, it has to be the next one, because I'm out that week. Okay, I will. And Jana and I'll, you know, draft our colleagues memo, you know, relative, you know, to the process moving forward for the ASCC. And I'll probably start a draft, you know, on the design standards update.
Yeah, I think you should consider in the new year, once you have a full committee, it's sort of, once you get established a little bit of your scheduling, is start just assigning or getting volunteers within your committee to kind of start doing little drafts and working on all these different projects that are relevant.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
I don't disagree.
Mm,
And we still have to work too.
yeah. And handle projects that come. Or the two.
Yes.
Right.
Need work to be. Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Thank you.